Hello, friends. We're so happy you've joined us today as we gather again to spend some time worshiping God here at First Lutheran. And as we continue in a brand new series for this month, and it's a series we call Family Vacation. It is that time of year, isn't it, when we take off and we hit the road and we go and do all these great things as a family. I can think of so many memories of traveling with my kids and just great times, right? You know, you think about all those places you go, all those things you see. It's just wonderful, that opportunity to be away. You know, I remember when our kids were really young, Sarah and I decided to do that all-American road trip vacation. The 2-week extravaganza. The only thing we were missing was a wood-paneled station wagon. We had our minivan, and we loaded the kids and all of our luggage into that minivan to take off for 2 weeks as we headed to the East Coast from Minnesota. And we had one of these with us. Do you remember these? If you were a member of AAA, you could go to a AAA office and order a triptych, which gave you a triptych for your entire journey. And depending upon what states you were in, you switched to a different triptych. And I remember driving in the car, and Sarah would have the triptych out, and she'd be paging through it, looking at all the things we could see along the way so we knew where to pull off and where to do all these great things. Well, nowadays, we don't need necessarily the triptych, though I know they still produce them. But you can get them on your smartphone. You can get them on whatever device you've got, and you can use them to find your way to where you want to go. But sometimes on these trips, they don't always look like this. They don't always look so wonderful. I can remember on that trip we took, I decided, when we were up east of Minnesota, I decided, you know what? I think for lunch, we're going to stop at a place, at a famous, well-known fast food place that uses the color white in its name, and a place a king lives in its name. And I don't want to name it. You know who I'm talking about. And we got the kids all of those little burgers and fries. Bad idea. Let's just say my kids don't react to those burgers very well, and it changed the scent of the car. Yeah, those things happen on our trips, don't they? Sometimes our trips don't go as planned. Sometimes our trips can be a complete disaster. Well, over these next few weeks, we're going to take a look at different people in the Bible and the trip that they took. Their trip is with God and the different ways that they traveled with God. And so we're going to kick off our series this week by going to this guy, Abraham. We oftentimes refer to him as Father Abraham. Abraham is an interesting character in our Bible. Abraham represents really the first real connection to God's humanity, and especially in terms of how the church is going to be built, how the faith is going to be built. It all comes back to Father Abraham. So if we look at the Bible, we go to the book of Genesis. And in the book of Genesis, we read these words. And the Lord said to Abram, "Leave your native country, your relatives and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you." What incredible words for Abram to hear. See, he doesn't change his name to Abraham until he goes on this journey with God. At this point, his name is Abram, and he is married to his wife Sarai. And so they begin this journey with God. Now, there's something that I think we oftentimes forget about Abram. Abram wasn't a follower of God. Abraham comes from a place called Ur. And this is an area in which they worship multiple gods. Now, somehow, God looks at this region, picks this region that worships idols, worships false gods, and finds this family of Abram. And says to Abram, I want you to do something. Starts with this. God said to Abram, I want you to leave. I want you to leave this place that is familiar. Now, Abram has made a good life for himself, probably passed down from his father. His brother has recently died. And so when God says to Abram, I need you to leave, Abram takes with him his father, his wife, and his brother's son, Lot. They go, following a God that, for the most part, is brand new to them. Let that sink in for a moment. Abram gets picked out of a group of people who worship false gods and somehow trusts this voice, trusts this God who's asking him to leave everything behind, all the stuff they've accumulated. They can only take that which they can carry and what their servants could bring with as well. Abram is asked to leave a really good life, and he does it willingly. You know, I think sometimes God calls you and me to go on journeys similar to Abram with our faith. And in our journey, God asks us to leave some things behind. Maybe we get invited into our faith journey and God says, you know, I know that you are wrestling with behaviors, addictive behaviors. I want you to leave that behind. I want you to trust me. Trust that I can provide for you that which you got before from those behaviors. Maybe sometimes on the journey, God says, I need you to leave behind. I need for you to leave behind that toxic stuff that's in your life. Maybe it's a relationship that's not good for you. And God invites you to trust God and to leave that behind. So God said to Abram, leave, and Abram and his family get up and they go. They leave and they follow God. And God brings them to a place called Haran. Now, it's kind of interesting because Abram's brother was named Haran. And so his father, who is with him, comes to this place during this time of grief. And when he gets to this town that has the same name as his son, for the first time in a long time, he feels at peace. Now, Abram could have easily stopped right there and started his life anew and started to rebuild all of his wealth and all of his stuff. But God had something else to say. Over time, God said to Abram, Abram, I need you to go. I need you to pick up and go now. I don't need you to stay here at this place. And Abram listens, and they pack up and they go. Now, Abram's father decides he's going to stay. He's an older man, and frankly, I think he probably felt at peace and comfortable in this town that was named after his son, or with the same name as his son. But God needed Abram to go. To go. And Abram does it. With complete trust, he goes. He goes to wherever it is God is leading him. And he does it with a lot of promises. See, God has said things to Abram that he had never heard before. That his barren wife will one day have a child. I mean, he hears from God all these positive things. For the first time, he is worshiping a God with some expectations, a God who's got some follow-through. All of those gods back in his land, all of those false gods, all those idols, never could follow through. But this God does. This God follows through. And so when God says go, Abram says we are going. In our journey too, God says, I need you sometimes to get out of that comfort zone of yours and go. It would have been easier for Abram to stay, but God needed him to go elsewhere. And you and me, sometimes God calls us to go outside our comfort zone. How do you respond? How do you respond on that journey? Do you respond with the complete trust like Abram? Knowing that you don't know exactly what's going to come about from this, but you trust that God's got this. That God is going to be with you. That God is going to give you what you need to do what you need to do at that very moment. Well, the last thing that God says to Abram on his journey, on this travel, is God says this, I need you to be, right? I need you to be. What is he going to be? Well, Abram's going to be a blessing. Remember when I told you that Abram was out with God and God made that promise that his barren wife was going to have a child? Well, he did that outside on a starry night. And he invited Abram to look up into the sky and to see all the stars. So many, it was impossible to count. And God said to Abram, Abram, you will be a blessing. You will be a blessing to all of this. Generations upon generations are going to come back and they're going to know you because you trusted me. Now, that doesn't mean Abram was perfect. No, far from it. There were many times that Abram forgot. There were moments where Abram didn't trust, especially when it was around this whole idea of Sarai having a child. When it didn't happen in their timing, they took it upon themselves. And we know that Abram had a son with Sarai's servant. That would be Ishmael, his firstborn. But that wasn't the promised son of God. But God didn't give up on Abram. God didn't say, because you stopped trusting me, Abram, I don't believe in you anymore. No. God said, I still believe. I still believe you can be a blessing. So when you ever wonder why we call Abraham Father Abraham, it's because of that. It's because he was the blessing that God predicted he would be. What did his blessing look like? Well, his blessing was a lineage. It was a lineage that began with Abraham, went to his son, Jacob. Through Abraham, we had Jacob, and from Jacob, we have Judah. The lineage continues on. From Judah, we get to King David. From King David, we get to a couple from Galilee, Mary and Joseph. And we know what comes from Mary and Joseph and from God, and that's Jesus. A man named Abraham trusted God, trusted that God had a plan. And this God was new to him, but still, from deep within, we had the faith to trust and to allow God to guide. How about you? Do you got that trust? Do you trust that God's got a plan for you? That God knows how to use you to the best of your abilities? If not, I want you to hear God right now. God speaking to you and saying, oh no, friend, you will be a blessing. Yes, you. I'm talking to you. You will be a blessing to others. Friends, faith is a journey. Faith is the ultimate road trip. And thanks be to God, we have examples in our scripture like Abraham to show us that God is capable of taking even those who do not know him and turn them around to be a blessing. If that was true for Abraham, just think how much more true that is for you and me who know God, who know Jesus. We got an awesome journey ahead of us. Let's take the road trip. Amen.
This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings, and around me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's